Hello, chat. How are we doing tonight? Welcome to yet another Meet the Expert here on Agora.Community Live. Today we have a very special guest with a very special announcement at the end. So do stick around if you can, if you want to be one of the first to hear about this little announcement. Today on the stream we have Stephen Eusebio. He is an animator, works in the video game industry. We'll talk more about that in a little while when we get him on the show and talk to him. He is also just happens to be one of the instructors over at Animawarriors, which we'll be spending a good deal of tonight talking about as well. If you don't know who Animawarriors is, it is one of the many online schools. So I don't know if I don't even know if he would call it a school, but we'll get more of that from Stephen. I'd like to pick his brain a little bit and his perspective on what it feels like they're doing over there. Because if you checked us out, I think it was last? No, it was the week before last. I think we had Jorge on, and he was the one who founded Animawarrior, and we talked a lot about his motivations behind starting Animawarrior. So it'd be very interesting to hear a little bit about what it's like, kind of like in a classroom environment with one of the amazing instructors they have over there. So let's bring him on. We'll have a little chat about who he is, what motivates him, and like I said, stick around for the end because we have a little special announcement I'd like to drop. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. How are you? I feel like it's almost like I just kind of ambushed you with my presence.
No, it's all good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's awesome to have you.
Thanks for having me. And hello to everybody watching. And first and foremost, I hope everyone's doing well, happy, and healthy during these very trying times.
Absolutely. Yes, they come here for refuge out of the stormy seas of the pandemic world. It's funny that that Agora.Community was born out of the pandemic, because we launched it in the middle of the beginning, the first year. It was a big motivation behind Agora.Community because we were like, we've been talking about doing something like that for a really long time. And David and I were like, you know what, if there was ever a time, it would be right now, because, you know, the world kind of needs, they need something. They need a way to kind of stick together and keep learning, because it can keep you a bit more positive if you're learning to do something that you really love, and do it with a bunch of like-minded people. It can maybe take your mind off of just how crappy it is out there right now. So
I love that. I love that message, and that's something I really resonate with, because I have a strong belief in that when you decide to become an artist, whatever kind of art you may be, pursuing, you sign up essentially to become a student also for the rest of your life. And learning is obviously a really important part of that. And, in order to keep growing, you have to learn, and, um, the need to learn or the want to learn, I think, should always be present. So
Absolutely.
that's a great message, and I resonate with that a lot.
That's cool. That's awesome. So, well, you're in good company because I feel like everyone here is on a similar wavelength, and we've already established a pretty cool community of like-minded people. Some of them are professionals, some of them are just students, some of them are just starting out, some of them are just curious, some of them just like the idea of animating, and they just stick around because they find the conversation stimulating. So, we have a pretty good, interesting mix of fine people in the crowd. So let's start with a little bit about you. I mean, look, who is Stephen Eusebio? Like, Steve. I told you I would screw it up. Stephen Eusebio, where did you come from? Where did it all start? Why animation? And
Sure.
We'll talk a little bit more about why teaching in a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in LA for pretty much the majority of my life.
Okay.
I remember I have a very vivid memory of when I was in kindergarten. And it was one of those times where, they ask you what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
Everybody draws pictures, and, everyone takes turns going up to the front of the class and talking about what it is they drew and what they wanted to be. I knew. I mean, like, I didn't write something down, or I didn't put like an astronaut or a fireman. While those are all great, but like I knew for some reason. And I went up there with my picture and I held it up in front of the class and I showed the teacher and all of my like classmates. When I grow up, I want to make toys, I want to make video games, and I want to make cartoons. And that's never, it's just never changed for me.
You had a directive, you had like a vision of what you wanted to be, and you just held on to it tight all the way.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. Most people don't hang on to that kindergarten version of themselves. Usually it's like, oh, a fireman, or a nurse, or like a policewoman, or like the first president of the first, like it's always something usually very dramatic and very grandiose. And yours was like, I want to do something fun. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
You had to figure it out.
I don't know why it resonated so strongly with me. I don't know. And it was so clear, and obviously following down the path as like my mind and myself got older, obviously it just led me down to the path of, character animation.
Sure. Yeah. Like a very practical way to do kind of the thing that you kind of wanted to do. Right. I mean, the cool thing about,
exactly.
And that led you to also making video games, which is freaking cool. Right. Like you kind of killed two birds with one stone on that one. So good job. So, I mean, when are you launching your toy line, I guess is the question, right? It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time.
In the past jobs that I've had the opportunity to contribute to like, maquettes and like,
oh, that's fun.
Some statues. Yeah. It's been pretty fun, but yeah.
You got a little taste of that. So you technically check that off the bucket list then. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to check that off. I'd consider checking that off.
I'll give you that one. That seems fair. Okay. So you knew you wanted to do this. You eventually went to school somewhere, probably to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And where did you go to school for this?
So, actually, I graduated high school in the Philippines. It was probably the only place that I've lived outside of the U.S.
Okay.
I was there for about 3 years, and like the grade system is a little bit different there. So I ended up graduating early. I think I was like 16 or 17. Okay. And then I couldn't leave soon enough because I couldn't wait to get into college and like start learning.
Yeah. Since kindergarten, you had a plan. I mean, everything's just in the way. I mean, like the school stuff is just. That's funny.
The fire's been burning for a while, and finally I got to college.
We're almost out of wood.
18 years, I suppose. Yeah. So like right after I graduated, 2 weeks later, I flew back to LA, and then I actually went to Art Institute of LA.
Okay, yeah.
Big school. Where I graduated. It was an accelerated program. It was kind of like an institute in that sense, like a specialty school. So we ended up, graduating like in 3 years' time, like with an accelerated program with a bachelor's. And then not long after, I started working. And I can't really speak to everybody's experience with that school. I have found that there is a big similarity in that, everybody's going to have a different experience no matter where you go, whether it's a good school, whether it's a bad school, whether it's somewhere in between. The school is what people make of it. And, more you invest in the craft, the more you'll be able to get out of it. And I was one of those that invested quite a bit.
Mm,
And therefore I had a good experience.
sure.
And, really, really shortly after I got out of college and out of Art
Mm.
Institute, I was able to find work, and, there started my career at 20 years old, I guess.
Wow, that's cool. That started pretty young. I don't remember when I started. It was definitely not 20. I think I was definitely a little closer to like 23, 24. So 20 is pretty young to be jumping in. And what was the first kind of thing that you were doing, if you don't mind me
So the
asking?
first, no, not at all. I mean, there was like, freelance gigs here and there. Like towards
Mm.
the last year of college, I was doing some 2D stuff, some like Flash puppet animation stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
And then like I remember the work that I immediately got out of school was previs
Hmm.
work, actually.
Oh yeah.
Shot creation and stuff. Yeah, I was
Okay.
able to work on. I was stoked actually because I remember my favorite cartoon, in probably to this day, even now, is probably Airbender, The Last Airbender,
That's
right?
pretty good.
And
That's pretty
so, yeah,
solid.
the first project that I got to work on out of school was like the film adaptation for
Oh yeah.
Airbender.
Oh
Yeah, I
wow.
was doing
Okay.
previs for that, and when I heard about it, oh man, I'm stoked. Like, there could be no better fit for me
Was this
personally.
the M Night version, like the actual live action adaptation? Okay.
Yeah,
A
that's the
lot of
one.
controversy around this one.
And see, but back then, like when we were in
Yeah, yeah.
pre-production,
No,
there
no,
was
of
no
course.
controversy.
Because
Right.
the movie wasn't out yet. You're
Right.
hopeful it's going to just be like a dream come true, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was super excited to work on it, and then
Yeah.
the movie came out, and then I was less
A little-
excited, but
Well, it wasn't that bad. The problem is how do you possibly, first of all, M. Night, I mean, I don't know what's going on. He started so strong. You know what I mean? Like you take a look at like, why am I drawing a blank? The very, very first one with Bruce Willis was called
Signs.
Signs. No, Signs. That was with,
No,
that's with, oh my God, Joaquin Phoenix and Mel Brooks. No, the one before that was Sixth Sense.
Sixth
Thank
Sense.
you, thank you, Tyler. That movie was very like, I mean, I remember watching it and just being like, wow. And I watched again. I'm like, holy crap, he really was dropping these little like these breadcrumbs everywhere. How did I not
All the
see it?
way.
Like, why would I not react to this really weird ruby red, like doorknob? Like it right over my head. And so I don't know. And then I just feel like his movies have been, but anyways, long story short, it could have been anybody. It would have been very difficult to really meet the expectations that the fans would have had for a franchise as epic and as amazing as that.
Yeah, and I realize that now. I mean, after having digested how the movie came out and all that stuff, and like by the time the movie came out, I was well onto my next one or two jobs after that.
Naturally.
But, I came to the realization, like, whoever could have done it, it probably wouldn't have lived up to, to what I wanted it to be in the first place.
It's easy to be like, oh, well, M. Night, I mean, he dropped the ball. But like, it's like it could have been like literally anybody,
Anybody.
Although if Denis Villeneuve were to make the next Airbender movie, that would be something. I'm excited about Dune. I had to work another conversation somewhere. I cannot wait for that movie.
It looks really good.
Okay, so you were doing a bunch of previs. You touched on a bunch of different sort of industries, but then eventually you ended up somewhere that I think like a lot of people probably know.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, no, absolutely. Right now I'm working at Blizzard. Obviously,
Yes.
I'm part of my most recent work, and from like the work that was shared of mine, obviously, is from my time at Cinematics.
Right.
And
So is that
so
you started in the cinematic department specifically? Okay, cool. All right.
I started in the cinematics department, and then I left cinematics almost a year ago now, and I've been on the Overwatch team since.
Oh, that's fun. What a great project.
Yeah, but leading up to that, actually, I was working at an advertising studio for quite a long time, and we were working on a myriad of projects.
Okay.
And the only reason I mentioned that is because it was during that time that I realized that I had hit a certain point in my career where I wasn't learning enough of what I wanted to learn.
Okay.
I was learning a lot, just not enough of what I wanted to. And so I continued to seek out learning and education and tutelage wherever I could.
Yeah.
And so, I would work advertising our long hours. So I would work like 9 to 10 hour days. I would go home and I would work. I'd work on my stuff, or
Okay.
I would learn in online classes, so on and so
Okay.
forth.
All right.
And that
You were
eventually led to the build up to, where I am now. So
okay. So that's interesting. So in your mind, would you have considered? I would imagine, like so many others, Blizzard would be one of those destination studios, right? If you like the idea of working for a game company and you're an animator, it's like, of course, it's on the list, right? Because of the kind of the quality of work that comes out of that studio. I mean, I've been a Blizzard fan like way back. I mean, we're talking like PC days. Like, I mean, the very first
I'm with
Blizzard
you.
game I would have played would have been the first Warcraft game. I mean, that was my introduction to Blizzard. And I still remember I was just, I think maybe right out of high school when this happened. But I remember going and visiting a friend, and I'm like, "Where's Joe?" And everyone else was outside. And they're like, "Oh, Joey's playing a new game." I'm like, "Oh yeah, what is he playing?" I don't know. I don't know. It's got demons and stuff in it. I'm like, "Oh yeah." So I wandered down into the basement where his room was, and he was playing in this dark room. And I remember being struck so hard by the beautiful, like orchestral music of this game he was playing. And of course he was playing the first Diablo. And yeah, I mean, I've just been stuck so hard on that company for so long. It's so everything they make is pure gold. So that's cool. That's awesome.
It's funny that you say that, because I had a very similar experience, but it wasn't in my instance. It wasn't, my a friend or like a sibling or something. It was my stepdad.
Oh yeah. What was he playing?
Yeah, he was playing Warcraft 1. He was playing Warcraft 1.
So he introduced it like, oh wow, really?
He was just in the room
so
playing.
Cool. Yeah,
my little brother and I walk in. Yeah, exactly. And like we started to learn the game and we got hooked. And fast forward a little bit, one of the most rewarding moments for me is being able to bring my stepdad and my little brother and give them a tour of the place, because
for sure. That's so cool.
It really bonded us, that shared experience, and being able to bring that around full circle for the three of us, it meant a lot to me.
It kind of started in a way there, right? Like, I mean, your journey started in kindergarten, as we discussed, but I mean, clearly there was a milestone there about like a game like that, of that kind of quality. I mean, if you think about Warcraft is ridiculous because of just how big it's become. Because I mean, it spawned, of course, World of Warcraft, one of the best-selling games of all, best gross, money-making games of all time. It is a huge favorite. It's been around forever. It just seems unbeatable. And then, of course, let's not forget that the Warcraft franchise itself also technically spawned games like Dota 2, which is also a gigantic, like really, 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 really highly played game. So it's just it's crazy to think. And it could be argued that League of Legends, because it's the MOBA was made with MOBA, of course, Death of the Ancients. Dota, the original, was a mod. I mean, I don't know if I'm blowing anyone's mind right now, because you have to be kind of old to know this, but Dota was the first. It was a mod from Warcraft 3, and it was a game that, like, because Warcraft 3, for those who never played it, they introduced something new, which were these hero characters, right? But you still had all the micromanagement of like an RTS game, a real-time strategy game, like the original Warcraft game. But it was kind of people quickly realized that, like, if you just focused completely on the heroes, you'd win the game typically, right? This other stuff was just a distraction. And so then someone came along and said, you know what? Why don't we just remove that stuff and just make it all about the heroes? And then thus was born the legend of the MOBA, and they popped up everywhere. I mean, even Blizzard made Heroes of the Storm, right? But yeah, like, I mean, it created an entire genre, and esports, it exploded to a whole other level just because of this. I'm such a nerd.
Yeah. Not at all. I'm right there with you, man.
So that's cool. So all right. So okay. So obviously we see this, we see the trajectory here. So you had a vision, and you found yourself, you worked hard to get there. Obviously, I find it interesting that you were in advertising, but it was like, this wasn't quite what you were looking for, and you were aware of that. You're like, hey, look, this is fine. I'm learning, I'm getting industry experience, but I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to keep working hard, and because you feel like you need to be somewhere else, and you got there. You got somewhere else, and now you're like, you're one of the few that get to work at that awesome studio. So why is it, so if you don't mind me asking, so because you also teach, not everybody finds the time, not everyone's interested in also dedicating part of their own private time to doing something like teaching what it is that they love to do? Why did you start teaching? And like what do you get out of that? What's going on there? What makes you tick?
I very distinctly remember that feeling that I ran into at my previous job where I was learning things and it was fresh and it was new,
Yep.
but it wasn't necessarily relevant to where I wanted to go, like what I wanted to be or where I wanted to be at, like skill wise. And I remember that revelation very much. And I remember beginning online school and I remember how much of an impact my mentors had on me.
Okay.
And how much of a positive impact my mentors had on me.
Okay.
And how much they shaped it for me and how grave an experience that was for me. And I can't speak for everybody, but my particular experience was fantastic. And so, it's come full circle for me in that I want to give the experience that I had to somebody else if I'm able to.
Why?
And, that leads me down like it makes me really passionate about it in that I know that not everyone has an experience like mine. And so having been exposed to the good experiences that I've had in mentorship, if I can kind of replicate that and give that to somebody else, then I definitely will.
Because you just feel like people deserve it, right? If people are interested in something, it'd be nice if they could, like, it sucks when someone is in love with something, but then because it's a bad experience, they fall out of love with it. And it's like, oh man, it could have been so great, but it's just like, you let that experience sour you, and these things happen, right? Like, it's like,
absolutely, it happens every day.
They can, for sure. It's the people in that, and that kind of thing can snowball quite quickly. And now you have people that are no longer following their dream. They're on some other sort of parallel universe doing something that they were probably maybe not meant to do. And maybe some people find other great things that they love, but other people will always look back on that thinking like, what if I kind of followed that? Yeah, that's interesting. So in your mind, you felt like some overwhelming sort of natural need to kind of give back a little bit and help provide people with that, with a positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know what it's like to be like to put tons of pressure on yourself and learn through through the fire pretty much, and jumping in the deep end and putting all this like pressure on yourself, and it doesn't have to be that way. And it really shouldn't. If your animation or your craft or your art is coming from a place of pressure or anywhere related to that, I don't think, one, you may enjoy it as much, two, you may not get the best work out of yourself. And it's just, it should be about the journey, not the destination, right? And so like the whole time while you're crafting all that stuff, if it's not coming from a good place, you're not enjoying yourself, so on and so forth, then what's the point?
Yeah, it's too bad that more studios don't understand that, though, because I mean, when money enters the arena, it does have a tendency to skew things a little bit perspective wise, right? I mean, it's funny because I think it's a pretty universally understood thing, at least from my perspective, that good management usually comes down to taking care of your team, making sure that they have what they need to be able to do their job well. If you worry about that, the money should just come automatically. If you have a good product and you have good people that are motivated and healthy and are happy, God forbid, and fulfilled creatively, then you're good. Everything else just works itself out. So as a manager, worry about that first. And it's amazing that for whatever, maybe it's just because it's easier. Like maybe it's just, I don't know. I've always tried to figure this out. Like, what is it? Just why is the default instead? Oh, well, actually, I'm just going to squeeze them. I'll squeeze people for as much work I can get out of them and make it all about pressure tactics and all about, like, I don't know. Is it just laziness, or is it just a misunderstanding? Like, or is it culture, or like in your mind, what do you think contributes to that sort of weird sort of, like, it seems so obvious, and anybody who knows artists knows they need a little bit of room, and they need to be, they need to feel safe, and they need to feel encouraged. They need to feel creative, and they need to, you just can't, we're not stone that you can squeeze blood out of. I don't understand why it somehow translates to that all the time.
I think you hit it. I think you hit it right on the head in saying that, the goal or the focus should be on the people.
Yeah.
Right. And all of the money or whatever comes from good work, all of that's a byproduct.
Yeah.
That will be a byproduct of like focusing on the correct things.
Yeah.
And there's a big there's a big kind of notion that, like, crunch should be expected, or long hours, or like a
Mhm.
high pressure environment should be expected.
Mhm.
Sure, they may come up, but I don't believe that should be the norm.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to what I believe of, if your work is coming from a place like that, you're not getting the best work out of yourself.
No, definitely not. Even if you're doing
And
good
so,
work, you have to ask yourself what would it be like if you could actually have a little bit more room and a little less sort of like pressure and working like 60-hour weeks. And these are the
yes.
things that you have to ask yourself. There's no way that you'd be producing much better work, probably your best work if you had better conditions.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a balance for everyone, and I think this is something that a lot of people may not realize, or maybe not recognize while they're learning. Right? Is that there's a balance for everyone,
Yep.
whether it's like a work-life balance, or like, the time that you commit to your work, and like balancing that with life stuff.
Yep.
That balance is one. It's going to look different for every single person,
Totally.
because
Because everyone has
everybody's
different
different.
needs. Exactly.
Absolutely. That balance is going to be different for every single person. But on top of that, the balance is constantly going to change for yourself.
For sure.
The balance that you need to kind of maintain like a healthy lifestyle mentally and physically is not going to be the same maybe a month from now, or maybe 2 months from now, or,
For
even
sure.
a year from now,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
even like the next day.
Well, because
It's
you're gonna,
something that's
yeah, because you're
constantly going to change.
exactly. You're evolving. I mean, your family life and your home life is got its own arc and trajectory. You might have kids, and then suddenly that changes like literally everything. And I mean, like
Everything.
it's especially if you're the soon to be mom, because like lots and lots of things are going to change. And so it's and suddenly the reality that you're now facing at the workplace is
Hmm.
it has to change. And it's amazing
Hmm.
that there's this weird, almost strange sort of belief that it can't. And it's like, well, but
Hmm.
why? Why?
Hmm.
It's funny that
Hmm.
you bring all this stuff up, because I mean, and this is a perfect segue to talk a little bit about Animoria, because when Jorge was on our conversation with, we talked a little bit about some of his motivations behind, like, I mean, he was very open about how, he kind of burned himself out. He was chasing after this, like he needed to be the best, and he was driving himself to oblivion. And it
Hmm.
almost required him to be looking into the abyss himself to
Hmm.
realize, why am I doing this? And
Hmm.
why are other people doing this? This is crazy.
Hmm.
And he kind of like, it almost like a new purpose suddenly kind of
Hmm.
shone down on him, and he was like, I need to build a better place for myself. And while I'm
Hmm.
at it, I can maybe teach people that it can be better. And it seemed to be like, it was clear that that was a very central pillar to the entire creation and the growth and culture that was sort of like, those first seeds were planted in soil that was fertilized by this idea that it
Uh-huh.
could be better, it could be different, it doesn't need to be. And it was crazy because the conversation quickly turned into this, like, we were talking about this right before we rolled, or we went live, this epiphany that blew my mind. I don't know why, because it was like
Mhm.
so obvious when he said it. It's like, think about it, Brent, like schools, we teach people in school as we're preparing them for the industry. What are we preparing them for? We're preparing them for, and not I cannot say that all school, I mean, Animawarriors is a perfect example of school that doesn't do this on purpose.
Mhm.
But like so many schools are guilty of this sort of meat grinder, like sort of Navy SEAL boot camp thing, that they're
Mhm.
trying to prepare you for crunch and for like high
Mhm.
demanding. And it's like, that's crazy, because what you're not only you're literally teaching people, you're normalizing it before they even get into the industry. So no one's
Yeah.
ever going to go and say, hey, this feels weird. They're going to be like, oh yeah, it's like, I mean, obviously it's like this. I mean, they told me it was going to be like this. Like, why? I can't really complain. I signed up for
Yeah.
this. It's like, wow, really?
Why
It's
when we had
totally true.
spoken when we had spoken right before we rolled, I think like I think it was put best in that, like, it's, for some reason it's mind-blowing. It shouldn't be, because the people, you know, when students are in school and they're learning about animation and all that, right? They're
Yeah,
basically forming the blueprint of what they're going to be doing and how
totally.
they're going to be doing on the job,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
so, if that's instilled, in them that early, then of course they're going to default back to that, and it shouldn't
absolutely.
have to be that way. It
Nope.
doesn't have to be that way.
Nope. Nope.
And, you know, that's one of the big things that I love about the school. And that's one of the things that I try and do my best to give all of my students in my classes is one, making sure that I'm as flexible as possible for everybody, you know, that attends my workshops or in my classes, because I know everybody's got their own lives, everybody's got their own things going on, everybody's got their different balances, and I want to be able to be flexible enough for them, right?
Yep.
So whether that's different times, whether that's restructuring like the scheduling of classes, like because when I teach my class, I have structured times at which I want to talk about certain things, right? But you know, one of the small things that you know teachers can do, and one of the things that I enjoy doing is I tell my students, is like, if you guys got to take off early, it's totally cool. But if you want to get your critique in before you leave, I totally get that. So if you want your critique at the very top of class, that way you can get it. You can ask me questions, and then if you got to bounce, you can bounce. It's totally
I do the same
cool.
thing. I totally do the same thing. I'm just email me. Don't feel bad, and I'll just put you up. And if it looks like I forgot, just message me on the side. I'll be like, oh yeah, no problem. I'll just work you in right away. Because I mean, it's no hair off my chest, right? Like what? Why not? I know it's funny how it's funny because just that little bit of flexibility, like the gracious flexibility that was such a small offering, is unfortunately something that we often don't see in the workplace, where it's like, people need a little bit of flexibility. Can you just again, some studios are awesome and they're very progressive in this, and like they allow for more flexible hours, but it's not the norm. It is not the norm.
No, and that's a really unfortunate circumstance in that, because if crunch and like high pressure and like tight deadlines on the job should not be a normal thing.
No.
To my understanding of that, and when I look at that, that means something went wrong in the production, or something happened that wasn't foreseen enough in the production. If it happens again, that just means that the problem wasn't fixed.
Yep. Because where's the incentive to fix it if people are just throwing themselves into the fire to fix it? It's funny. We talked a little bit about how why is it like that, and like I think that often production gets they get like VFX is a good example of industries that over promise, right, and then the over promising ends up like falling on the shoulders of the crew, right? And it's interesting because if you really look at it, there is in so many studios there's a very obvious structural problem with the incentives because everyone is incentivized in a different way, right? Where the people in the floor, the production team, they're usually typically the ones they're incentivized by getting it done. Maybe there's sometimes there's even some like bonus money in it for you if you get it done on time or early, and like there are and it's also just the gratitude or the feeling of like accomplishment, right? Because at the end of the day, we're artists, so we would probably be doing it anyways, right? That's the weird part about art, being paid to do art. It's a little bit weird in the sense that, and unfortunately the industry they kind of abuse it a little bit, because we are willing to get it done and put that work in and feel like there's a sense of accomplishment, even if we were put through the coals. And if we're training people in school that's normal, then in some weird way, it almost feels like a bigger accomplishment because we didn't die while we did it. It's like, really? Well, you don't get a badge for this. That's not good. You shouldn't have barely made it, but it's weird, right? And a lot of it has to do with like producers that are like on the phone with a client and they're like, oh my God, sure, we could totally do that. And it's like, are the producers going to be there overnight trying to, like, some of them are great and stick around, but the crew didn't make the promise, you know what I mean? And like, and if there's no overtime, sort of proper overtime structure, then there's not even an effect on the bottom line. So again, there's no way. Why would the studio learn and do it differently is the question.
It's funny because we were talking about that right before we went live, right? Is that the cause and effect completely skips that and falls directly onto the people that are actually on the production floor at the time that happens. Yeah.
It's like we're the ones jumping in the puddles, but no one's getting splashed around us. It's just us, and it's like that is, of course, that's a recipe for disaster, because now the problem is the structural part, the business end of the deal is not learning from that mistake, because they're not paying for any mistakes, right? So but anyways, it's interesting, and this all comes back to, in a weird way, is like even the producers and often like the CEOs, they probably went through schools that were grinding as well, and so maybe they think it's normal. So like this culture of trickle down culture effect of people driving their team to the brink is probably because they were taught that way. And then
Yeah.
and their first job was like that. They had a mentor that was like that. It reinforced those things. And now next, it's the industry is just like that. And it's just the way it is. And it's like,
Yeah.
well,
And it's
shucks.
funny that you mentioned that, because that's another reason why I would like to be, or I'd like to try and be a
Yeah.
part of a positive teaching and learning
Wouldn't that be
experience.
nice? Yeah.
Right?
Fix it at the source, right? Teach
Yeah,
people it doesn't have to be like that.
yeah, not just for the benefit of the students, but hopefully like for the benefit of the industry too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that's one thing that really resonates with Jorge, and like one thing that really resonates with the school, and that's part of the reason why I love it so much. And another one of the big draws to me to the school was in that we hold in very high regard everyone's individual creative vision, right? We don't want to shun that away, or we don't want to make it seem like we're churning out animators for people to fill in seats, right?
Yep.
We want to
Yep.
make sure we cultivate, and we want to make sure we nurture that kind of creativity out of each and every individual, so that when you're not just hiring, or when recruiters or people are looking at who to choose, right? They're not looking at animators, they're not looking at like people to fill seats, they're looking at individuals and like what each of them can bring that's different.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that would certainly help things, because otherwise you just feel like you're kind of a number being like sent into the slaughterhouse and sort of just taking one for the team, right? So
Yeah,
I mean, okay,
absolutely.
so I'm curious about this. So I understand that was a lot of Jorge's vision. And that translated into a school that was founded. And like, so how did that happen? Where did you interface? Like how did you discover Animawarrior? How did you become was it like you caught a whiff of this vision and you're like, oh my God, I love the smell of that. I need to be a part of that because I believe it's like, I'm on a mission, and that's like, I have to I'm just curious. How did that marriage happen?
So teaching is something that I've always wanted to do. I knew that I've had a great passion for teaching, even prior to like teaching classes, like just teaching amongst like coworkers, and even at past jobs, like mentoring and tutoring and like teaching is something that I was always really passionate about. And thankfully I've gotten the compliment, the biggest compliment in my opinion, a couple of times, in that, you'd make a great teacher. And that's I don't know if there's a better compliment than aside from like, oh, you'd make a good dad, but that's right up there in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So I remember that some of the people that I was working with were connected with Jorge because they had come from the same studio. And then I saw just on a feed that they were looking for teachers. So I decided to reach out. And then we talked about it, and we kind of aligned on visions and the messaging, and pretty much like the core values of the school and the core values of what I believed in. And from there, we were off to the races. I had lots of ideas of how like workshops could work. Some workshops that we could come up with that aren't really taught in the way that not taught in the way that we've seen before, or even structured in the way that we've seen before, like particularly with like the NN team workshop and like the dynamic action workshop that I'm teaching now, and like some of the stuff that we have coming up. We're given, the instructors, we're given a lot of freedom in how we would like to structure the class and all that. And that was really great for me. We didn't follow like a clear cookie cutter curriculum similar to, that would make us pretty much just similar to a lot of the other institutions out there.
Interesting. So how long you've been instructing there with Animoria then by now?
A little over a year now. I know our conversations had actually started pretty early on, but it wasn't until maybe a few months after we started talking that I actually started teaching my first workshop there.
Okay.
But yeah, I think a little over a year now.
Okay. And so like I'm curious as to, so like, because we talked a lot about the culture and how to change a little bit of that and maybe do that at the source. So you gave me an example of just a small sort of small gesture that goes a long way as far as flexibility. But like, what other things do you feel like makes Animawarrior different and helps sort of echo this really good message that it can be done differently and it doesn't need to be a friggin' grind.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we constantly try and preach is that, again, it's going to come back to like where your animation is coming from as an individual, right? If it's coming from a place of pressure, chances are probably not as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Right. Not to say that like the fire of a pressure, like the fire that pressure creates can't create something good.
Yeah.
But like during these stages, now is the time you want to listen as loudly as you can, or like, as closely as you can to your creativity. Because while you're learning, it's probably bursting. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, just taking every small step or every small like thing into consideration to make sure that my students aren't under any pressure.
Okay.
I let them know like there's no structure to the way the workshop is set up. You're not required to turn things in if you don't want to. If you're not ready, you don't have to. If you don't want to show it in front of the class, you can send it to me like in the middle of the week. If you can't submit something every week, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We will get to it,
It's funny that you say that, because I get messages from some people that are in my workshops, because I teach over at iAnimate, and I get messages sometimes like in almost like a panic. Oh, hey sir, I'm really sorry, but like I don't think I can be able to make it. I'm like, like, first of all, no problem. Like, I mean, life happens. Like, I mean, no, this just let me know when you can come back, and let me know if you need help catching up, because I don't want you to feel like you get left behind because something happened this week. And then, because I know how hard that can be if you have a busy schedule. And for some of these people, they're moonlighting, right? There's some of them are like single parents that have a job, but they have a dream of like either changing careers, or maybe they want to get a promotion or something, and they're already kind of animating. Who knows what they're doing? And like you said, everyone's got a story, right? So like, it's like, who am I to make a judgment on? It's all relative too, right? Like someone's catastrophe is another person's like, small trip or stepping on a piece of Lego. It's like, they're very different. They both hurt a little bit. But in this grand scheme of things, it all depends on where, the personal sort of background and what the backdrop is and the context behind all of these things that happen to people. So it's funny that it's clear to me when they send messages like this that they're not used to forgiveness and like some grace. It's weird. I'm always surprised by that tone.
It's sad in a way, isn't it?
I know.
It's so sad. It's sad in a way, and it's what they deserve to show. It's what they deserve to be shown, but it's also what they deserve to show themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so so I let them know. It's no pressure. I make sure to let all of my students know at the very top of each workshop. This workshop is just as much yours as it is mine.
Totally.
So this is a two-way street. I don't want it to be, me just talking.
That's it.
This is about a community. It's a group, and we're on this adventure together.
Yeah, that's a good message.
And one of the things that I like to do with my classes, a few other little things that I like to offer my students is I do this thing called student choice.
Okay.
So normally my classes are about 12 weeks long. And I reserve, and the way I structure my classes are like, we look at a piece of animation together for anim inspiration. We talk about it together. And then I have a lecture prepared every week. And then we'll go into some kind of workshop, the workshop portion where we go over everybody's work, everybody that wants to show or is comfortable showing. And then after that, I'll take the time to, I call it the workflow portion. I'll jump into Maya or I'll jump into a 2D software, and then I'll answer any questions they might have, whether it's technical, whether it's workflow. But the bigger version of that are my student choice weeks. I normally reserve it for like halfway through the class and like the very last week of class, in that I let the students vote on a topic they want me to cover during the lecture portion of the class.
Oh, that's so cool. I do something similar. That's really funny. We totally are like playing from the same playbook. Yeah, you keep going. I'll share my little story afterwards, but I'm curious where this one goes.
Oh yeah, no. So I mean, like, and I've gotten a couple of topics, right? And I make sure to make sure. Well, we make sure that our students are always connected. Like, they can message us through, like, we have a Discord up, and we have one
Right.
for each class, so we can all.
That's good.
I create a channel. I put some of the topics that my students have chosen before, and like, they'll upvote it, they'll downvote it, they'll propose new ones. So that's something I like to offer my students. But another thing that I like to do is, let's say, for example, the workshop that I'm teaching now is a dynamic action workshop. And so it's all about, high energy action, but not just action, action with a purpose. Right. So what I do is, I offer my students one of two things. Like, during the workflow portion of the class, which is normally like the last 30 minutes, I tell them, or I ask them at the very top, like week one, would you guys rather have me cover like little topics at the end of each class, like, oh, how to deal with constraints, what animation tools I use, so on and so forth? Or would you like me to create a shot alongside you guys, and you, in the last 30 minutes of every class, you guys can watch me work?
Oh, that's fun.
And I'll get as far as I can, but they at least get to see like my process and the way that I create my artistic process. But more importantly, I think, is that they get to see the mistakes that I make.
Yeah, kind of humanizes it a little bit, right?
Absolutely, because there's like, everybody makes mistakes. Even people on the job. Mistakes are part of the process.
Absolutely. My Z key is worn right down, man. I got no Z left on it. It's a well-used key
at this point.
It's not the Z key, it's the blank key. Control blank. That's what I use in Maya on a regular basis. Actually, it's not even control. That's not even a Maya hotkey, so I take it back. It's just the Z.
But I find that being vulnerable in front of your students, then that way, showing them mistakes and then showing them how I would work myself out of those mistakes.
That's cool.
There's a lot of value in that. And like, when I believe, like, when teaching, it doesn't have to be like this really pristine thing that you uphold, it shouldn't be like, allowing yourself to show yourself as a teacher, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and allowing yourself to show that, like, mistakes happen, not just to you, but just to me. And this is how I work my way out of the ones that I run into.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I remember when I started teaching, it was really hard, and it was difficult for me to admit I didn't know something, and now I'm just like, I really don't know. And if you can figure it out, let me know. Email me, because I'd like to know, because I really don't know the answer to that question. But it took me a while to get there, to where I felt like that was okay. Like, it was. I mean, teaching online can be kind of weird for a multitude of reasons. Now it's sort of like becoming more and more the norm. Yeah. It's funny, because we do something similar in a class I teach, where at the last few weeks I make sure there's some openness to it, because I teach like gameplay, like an introduction to gameplay animation, and we're working inside of Unreal. So I let them vote. I'm like, okay, here's three choices, which choose your own adventure. And they, typically it's a unanimous vote, because usually there's one that's really exciting. But it's fun, because it gives them a little bit of ownership as to, like, what are you excited about learning? And it's amazing, because every group is different. Some groups choose a really technical route. Some choose to really focus more just on the animation. And,
and it's so much fun in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. It's so much fun. And what I like about that, it is, when I was learning, I often found myself like at a crossroads sometimes, like, oh, I want to take this workshop because I want to learn about this, but I also want to really take this workshop because I want to learn about this. And they overlap, and I've got to choose one, and they cost a certain amount of money. So like the opportunity that, like, the student choice weeks, the opportunity that it presents to the students is that, oh, maybe I can learn a little bit about something else that I wanted to take a workshop on while still in this workshop. So like, even though the workshop that I'm teaching now and a lot of the ones that I've done most recently are action oriented, right? One of the very popular ones that have come up is like facial animation.
For sure.
Right. And, it's not something that shouldn't be overlooked in an action shop, but obviously it's not like the star of the show in action
Typically
shop.
Not.
Yeah. And so, it's
unless you're a disembodied head, and then maybe, right? I mean, let's be fair. Let's give credit to the disembodied heads in the game and in the animation world, right?
Zombie head, sure, yeah.
Yeah. It's so it's interesting. It seems like, I mean, okay, here's the $1 million question. Then this will be the last one. And I think we'll probably take it to Q&A. Let chat get in on the action here. I'm sure they have some questions that they're itching to ask, but cool. One thing I would ask, and this comes from a natural curiosity and because I also teach, because I mean, we talked about pressure, right? I mean, there is in my mind, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. In my mind, there are some types of pressures that are good, right? Like there's a difference between bad pressure and then good pressure. And I often, this usually comes up in a conversation when I talk about how I feel about crunch. Crunch, in my mind, there's a difference between crunch that is based on requiring the team and it's mandated by the production to work overtime just to achieve like a goal, like to get across the finish line because there was these things we said we would get done. Now everyone has to sprint to get it all done, as opposed to recognizing that we should have never have even tried to agree that these things were even doable. Versus the kind of crunch that sometimes you experience because you're putting in it's the end of a sprint and it's like you spend a couple extra hours, but it really feels like it's coming from the place of like, it's like an outlet. And it's like, you have made your decision that you want the shot to be a little bit better than the last one. And you put that extra time in, but you never ever feel like you're pressured to do it other than the pressure that came from yourself. And of course, Jorge has got some thoughts on this because he was dealing with some inner voices that were literally, they were the biggest pressures. So maybe some people are pushing themselves a bit too far, but I mean, every once in a while to just do that extra little bit of polish on the shot is not a bad thing, because that pressure is coming from a place of wanting to improve or wanting to just, it's for you though. It's for you. If you get across that finish line and you're extra proud of that shot because you stayed late, even though your supervisor's like, no, go home. It's good enough. And you're like, no, man, this one's not good enough. I want it to be a little bit better. So it's funny because it's an interesting balance, right? As how do you get a studio and how do you drive a class in a way that sort of gives some flexibility for some of that, those passion driven moments of like staying up a little late one night just to get it a little bit better because you were just you couldn't let it go. You know what I mean? How do you find the balance in your own life, and how do you sort of find a balance maybe in your class?
So, in regards to like some of the pressures being good, I think you hit it right on the head in identifying where that pressure is coming from.
Yeah.
Whether that pressure is coming from like, unfortunately, like something you can't control, where like, it's being mandated or it's being required of you. And not just of you, but of like your colleagues as well, that you have to stay late, you have to fill this quota, so on and so forth. Whereas like the second type of pressure that you were talking about is commitment to the craft.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's I believe in my mind, that's the good kind of pressure.
Absolutely.
And I think along with that though, letting that be your constant mode, like the commitment to the craft at a very high level, letting that be your constant is not healthy.
Yeah,
and that's where true. I think
that's where I think Jorge sort of found himself in that predicament. I think, right, is that he was like that pressure from the inside can be good, but it's not sustainable all the time. Allow yourself. It's sort of like indulging, right? Sometimes you'll stay up a little late to watch the extra couple episodes of like the Game of Thrones, right? You're gonna do it because you're like, you're gonna be tired tomorrow, but like, what? Damn it, you've earned it. It's it's Thursday night. You're gonna eat a bag of freaking chips and you're gonna watch this. It's like as long as it doesn't become like quite literally every night and become a habit. And then suddenly your family are looking at you because you're not doing it, and like, how dare you not watch it until like and be tired tomorrow? That's where it gets a little bit weird, right? I mean, when we talked about something like this last time, chat, I can't remember who said it, but some very wise person in chat dropped something. I think it might have been Joe Animates, but someone said it's a slippery slope because when I even if it's coming from a good place, it needs to be carefully managed, because otherwise it can sometimes just mutate slowly into an expectation. And suddenly it's like what needs to be understood by people is it just because you're willing to do it and because you're having a night there where you want to push it to the next level doesn't mean that you're going to judge anybody for not doing it. And if you see that kind of crap happening as a producer or as a supervisor, you gotta tear that down. You cannot allow that to happen. It's like, look, I celebrate so-and-so for staying late and doing that for themselves, but I want everyone to know that I told them to go home. And it's like, and if I see people feeling like they're guilting people or pressuring people into staying late because it's like what you're supposed to do, then I'm gonna have to take you aside and have a little conversation, because I don't want this team to become this. So it is a supervisor or the person who's driving a class. Someone is, at the end of the day, needs to be the one setting that tone, I guess, right? Like some sort of barometer for when people might be going a little bit too far off the tracks.
Yeah, and it is funny that you mentioned that, and this is the reason why I feel like whenever like crunch or high pressure or any kind of like culture like that is a repetitive thing, or it's a constant thing, or it's a natural thing, right? Something that reoccurs. I know that's just because it hasn't been addressed, because I've seen it firsthand. Like in my experiences, while we were at while I was in cinematics, actually, while I was at Blizzard. There was a point at which they do a fantastic job of managing all that.
I've heard this.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job of managing all that, and they place very high value on every individual's life and time. And so there was a point at which we had to go into a crunch, and crunch was and let me clarify what I mean by crunch, where like some studios may be crunching for 3.5 months, 4 months, starting from 50 hours to 60 hours to 70 hours, right? So this was, in my experiences, when I had heard like, we're going into crunch, it's like, okay, I've done this before, I could do it again if I really have to. But then, they gave us the window, and they gave us the hours, like, oh, we're really sorry, guys, we're going to have to crunch for 2 weeks. I was like, 2 weeks?
You're like, that's not... are you going to let it call it a crunch? Come on.
Yeah, that, and like, it's so...
I eat crunches like that for breakfast.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And they were really respective in that, like, the way it works there is, you're not required to put in a set amount of hours. If you can, great. If you can, don't worry about it.
Yeah, there you go. It's like almost like a kind of like, it's setting the tone, right? It's setting the tone.
Exactly. And then, productions after that never happened again. Yeah. And that's how I know that it doesn't have to be the norm. I know
it's interesting.
I know that the problem was addressed.
Yeah, because problems do happen, right? Crap happens in production, and nothing's
they're supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's exactly, and it's like a team sport. Sometimes, like you had to play an extra inning because it's just the way the game went. Yeah, but there's a difference between accepting that as the norm versus being like, okay, we are going to first of all, it's only who can do it. We're not mandating everyone to do it. B, we are officially recognizing that we are asking a lot of you. And C, we are going to definitely make the promise that we are going to try to fix the problem that led to this. So we don't see this as being the normal thing where every 2 weeks we're saying, oh, guess what? I'm really sorry to say. And, like it's
that time again.
Even if you say the right words, if it's always happening, then like prove it. Prove that it means a lot, that we don't have to do this all the time. Otherwise, it's just hollow, and then it's and then that's what happens. The next you're at, like, I don't want to name studios because we all know of the studios that have a reputation for this, but there are some that it's become the norm, and it's like people know it's like, and people have even said like
industry standard, unfortunately.
Yeah, and sometimes it's because it's maybe poorly managed. Some studios it's because it's the culture. It's like, well, that's just the way people are there, and it's like, well, okay, I don't know, man. It doesn't have to be. It really does.
That's by choice.
It is. Well, you know what? Hold on a second. I want to respond to someone in chat. Respectfully, Brent, aren't jokes like I eat crunches like that for breakfast part of the systemic issue though? It has macho overtones and marginalizes people of reluctance of crunch. I don't know. I mean, I agree if I were saying that on the production floor, but I was making that joke just to prove the point, right? Like, I think that is really like, I was, we're talking about bad culture and bad tones. I feel like the entire time I've made a pretty big point of saying that I don't think it's good. So it was totally in jest. So hopefully you don't take that the wrong way, Tyler. I'm certainly not trying to make light of it at all. Trust me, I've been to enough rodeos to I've got the bruises and the scars to show for enough of these completely ridiculous, unnecessary crunches. Yes, there's no such thing as a good crunch. But again, I still think it's an important message because people get confused on this, right? They get confused where it's like, well, but like, does that mean no one should ever work overtime? I'm like, it depends. Because if you really want to work overtime one night, I shouldn't shame you for doing it either. Because like it's just it's the same on the other side of the equation. It's like if you work at a place where it's like, no, we never do overtime, but then that doesn't doesn't allow for some of those creative sparks to happen and let someone just spend an extra hour like on a night just to finish that shot because they really like. I mean, I don't think there's, again, it requires a balance. It requires a constant sort of monitoring. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, most studios don't even care. They're just like, they just are away, and that's just the way it is my point.
You know, and that allowance for creative sparks on the other end of that too, like there's also no allowance for mistakes. Like, look, pipelines are created by people, and people are imperfect by nature. Like, of course there are going to be mistakes. You know, that has to be expected. And so, you know, accounting for that beforehand is, you know, part of the solution for that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. We're actually officially out of time. It's been 3 minutes afterwards. Can you stick around for another 10 minutes? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I mean, I want to make sure that we have some time. And I mean, and Tyler, if you want to talk more about that point you brought up, I mean, I totally get it. I know where you're coming from there, and I apologize if you got the wrong idea of what I was actually trying to do there. I was totally in jest. We're just having fun. But that being said, if anybody does have a question that they would like to discuss, there was lots of cool topics that came up tonight. Now's the time to do it.
Animation stuff, workshop stuff, teaching stuff. I'd be happy to talk about if anyone has any questions.
Absolutely. And make sure you put a Q colon because it makes it very easy to pull them out of chat if you do have a question. This has been something that's been going on lately that I really like. There's a new trend that I just love. Okay, here's one right here by Miss Plant. On the topic of students being taught destructive/crunch-like work habits, what are good habits that students should pick up? That's a good question.
That's a great question. Okay, so one of the things that I didn't do that I would hope a lot of my students do is not just predict, but obviously do your research and kind of find the path before you, right? Because I was under the very, very like stubborn I was under the very stubborn mentality that, like, you know, if I work as hard as possible, and hard meant like hard as possible, but if I work as long as possible, and if I work like as diligently as possible and commit as many hours as I can to it, like what I want to happen will eventually happen. Well, yes, you know, it did, and it did work out for me that way, but I'm pretty sure that there was a healthier way for me to do that. And in finding that balance, and you know, you have to commit to the craft for sure, because if there's anything that you should be investing in, it should be the craft, right? Chasing after a position or working at a studio or anything like that, all of that is a byproduct of investing in the craft. Like, invest in the work, right? If you invest in that, then everything else will come because of that. And another thing would be is to everything that I say to my students pretty much is like, make sure to find your balance. And then also, when your balance is no longer working for you, be gracious enough with yourself and with your work to realize that this balance is no longer working for me. I have to find a new balance. There should be a balance. It can't always be, you know, it can't be a constant. That kind of mentality and that kind of work ethic, or that kind of pressure that you put on yourself. It can't be a constant. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, it makes sense. I got another question here. This one from Zax Max.
Yeah.
Question: any advice on how I may be able to get into the industry? I live in a place that may not have any animation job opportunities.
So I think we've seen from like this past year and a half, 2 years, it feels like a very long time, but I think we've seen that those barriers of you know, being eligible for a job just because, or being eligible, the requirement for eligibility for a position requires you to live in a certain place, right? I think those are being torn down every day, even more every day, in that, like, you know, because everybody's working remote these days. We've been working remote for almost I don't know, it feels like it's almost been, like, I know it's been at least a year and a half. And so, you know, outside of that, like, there's a lot of remote work out there. It's available. And, to this, it goes along the lines of, it kind of overlaps with my previous answer to the previous question, in that just invest in hard work,
Yeah.
right? Because everybody is going to have a different learning curve, and that's okay.
Totally
Everybody's
okay.
going to have natural aptitudes to animation, like how well they adapt to it, how quickly they adapt to it. That's going to be different for everyone, and that's okay, right? And
Yeah.
so if you invest in working hard at it, all of that will come
Yeah.
as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I feel like it can be a little stressful for people who, like, for instance, really need a job, and they really want that job that they want, and sometimes it may not work out that way. Maybe you'll have to take a job to pay the bills, but try to find a way of also continuing to work towards this dream. I mean, I don't want to make it sound easy, because I know people are in some really tough spots. I'm just saying, when possible, if you can make it happen, you can make it happen. I totally agree with that message, by the way. This idea of people put too much pressure on themselves to assume that they're going to, like, take a course and then they're going to be ready. It's like, you know what? Maybe for some people, I hate those people. These people just pick it up really fast. I'm not one of those people, but they do exist, and they're going to make us all feel bad about ourselves. And they're not trying to make you feel bad, or at least I hope not. But basically, at the end of the day, you are yourself, and you pick up things at a certain speed. The one beautiful thing is if you give it enough time, that when you do finally come around to really, like, having those real connections with the craft, you're going to have, like, it's going to be yours. Like, there's going to be something about you that other people can't really. So yeah, I agree. Like, focus on yourself and keep working at it. And like, I guarantee you, like what Stephen was saying, that some of those borders did get torn down with the pandemic. If there was any silver linings for this industry, that would probably be one of them, is that maybe that you will have access to jobs that you might not have originally had access to, because people are now, like, a little bit more willing to have people work remotely, and you won't have to move across the world to get there, for instance. So hopefully that works out for you. But and I know for a fact that these good studios they are interested in working with people that are individuals, like Stephen said, and that are bringing something to the party. So if you focus on making sure that you've put the hard work in, that shows that you got something to offer, then people are going to find a way of working with you. It's just, it may not happen right away, though, unfortunately. So yeah, that's good advice. Just stay on target. If you love it, I mean,
it's going to show.
I like to think it will, but it will take discipline and time, and sometimes more time for others. And, like, it's sad to watch some people kind of give up on it when, it's they just haven't had that light bulb moment yet, Let's see what else. We got lots of stuff going on here in chat. How about one from Lucio? Hey, Lucio, what's up? I saw you say hi earlier when you showed up. I'm sorry, we're kind of in mid convo, so I didn't say hi back, but always nice to have you on the stream. Question: I would love to know more about your workshop at Animawarriors. So I guess specifics on, like, your class. I guess you're teaching one specifically right now, right? It's the you said it's the
dynamic action workshop.
Dynamic. Okay, so what kind of stuff are they going to learn in a workshop like that?
So actually, one of the things that I like to cover a lot in my class, in all of my classes, and I'll get to the action stuff, but a lot of the things that I like to cover in my classes, no matter what class I'm teaching, is I like to try and get across, fundamentals from other disciplines as well, because, like, so much of, like, art overlaps, and, like, in some of the animation schools, like, if you're only learning animation, you may not be there are just more things that you can look out for with those with those nuggets of knowledge from other disciplines that'll make your animation all that much better. Like, a very common one is, like, filmmaking and camera and all that. The composition, like the focal point, like the rhythm and the energy across sequences, and, like, color theory, and, like, design principles. I try and include a lot of that in every single one of my classes. But, like, the class that I'm teaching right now at the moment with Dynamic Action Workshop, obviously we focus a lot on what makes something dynamic, on really, like, stylized action. And on top of that, I think that I try to get across to my students the most in that workshop is, the big thing that's going to separate what you're doing in this class from a normal, like, body mechanics exercise is character motivation. And it should always derive from there. if you need to be able to give your character a purpose, and with that purpose, it'll pretty much dictate all of the animation choices that you're going to make. That, and I think the other one that I try and I try and repeat as much as I can, as much as I can, is in an action sequence or in an action shot, clarity is king. It can look as awesome as you might think, but if nobody knows what's going on, then it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, clarity is king, especially in a game.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Especially in a game. It's like people forget, like, we're entertaining, but we're also giving critical feedback, like the same way that like lights on your dashboard in the car light up when your engine's overheating. It's like if you don't see these and you don't understand them, then really bad things happen in the game, of course. And worse things happen in real life when you're driving a car that's about to explode. But it's funny because it really is part of the job, right? It's like it's a real
part
messaging.
Of the job.
It's huge. It needs to read so you understand.
There's so much information that has to be conveyed.
Absolutely.
I think people that play games take it for granted, quite honestly.
Yeah, if people only knew, right? If they only knew the amount of deliberation, the amount of iteration, the amount of fine tuning. I mean, I can only imagine what it's like at Blizzard, because it's like they have such a high standard. So it's like, I mean, I mean, it's just, there's painstaking efforts are going into making these animations not just look awesome, not just about get you excited to play the game and to play that character specifically, but like, I think that, Overwatch is such a good example because it's got because the game is the characters. Right. The brand of Overwatch are the lineup of characters, like any game, like any MOBA game. It's like that is the cast of characters, like a good movie or a good ensemble cast movie. It is the actors, the actresses, like the characters that they're there. That's what really kind of drives it. And so for sure, it's a big part of it is like making sure that you find a good, unique sort of style for each character so that it caters to different types of players.
One of the things that I love specifically about our game is that our characters, like, if you think about it, right? Our characters have names. Like, when you choose a character, you're not choosing the medic. You're not choosing like the rifleman.
That's right.
You're not choosing the grenadier. You're choosing Soldier 76, or you're choosing Tracer, or you're choosing Lucio. They have names. That comes with a lot.
That's right. It comes with backstories and everything. Yeah.
Correct. It comes with a lot more than people realize. Like, heritage, culturally, like where they're from, relationship with other characters. In the very, I don't want to say simple because it might be understating it, but like in the very simple aspect of, our characters have names,
Yep, it's true. It's funny. And like, don't make no mistake, the amount of deliberation, just even at the very beginning of the concept of that character. I mean, how many characters were conceived that never made the game? I can only imagine. There's a graveyard of characters that were probably awesome, but not just quite awesome enough. And so they just didn't, I can only imagine. That'd be so cool. You guys should release a book of all the characters that, the almost wers, of the Overwatch crew. Okay. Do you have time? I'm overstaying my welcome. So be honest. Do we have time for 2 more questions?
I can do one more, and then actually what I'd like to do is, if I'd like to extend this to to everybody taking the time out to watch, and I appreciate you guys all. Thank you. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to try and answer as best I can.
That's really cool. So you know what I'm going to do, actually, because people stuck around here to the end, it looks like most people are still here. I'm going to actually make the announcement right now, because maybe someone might want to ask a question about that. I keep forgetting that we didn't do that yet. So, and I don't, like I said, I've already overstayed my welcome for 15 minutes with you. So, I mean, you got a life, and I don't want to suck you in any further than I already did. It's just great conversation. It's hard to let go of, it's like I could talk to you all night. Okay. So here's the deal. So we're actually doing something really cool. We're actually collaborating with Animawarrior, which is cool that we did a big deep dive on what that school is all about and what the culture is all about. And, and Stephen even did a really good intro into his workshop, but there are many other workshops there. He's not the only instructor. So what we're actually doing is, Animawarrior has been gracious enough to actually, essentially donate 10 reviews to the cause. They're going to be, so they're I mean, donate's not the right word. Essentially, they are heeding the call of the community, and they're going to give everyone a little taste of what Animoria has to offer. And some of the instructors over there, including Stephen, I think, hopefully, is going to be one of the people that could be offering one of these reviews. I have no absolute news right now on exactly how that's going to happen, or exactly when. We're working out the details as I speak, but that is happening, and it's going to happen soon. That I can promise. So there's going to be a way of obviously figuring out a way of distributing those 10 reviews, because obviously not, 10 is awesome and super gracious, but it's also just a drop of the pond when it comes to all the people that would, I'm sure, kill to get a review from one of you amazing instructors. So more news on that very soon. So please do stay tuned. But I'm super excited, and like on behalf of the community and on behalf of just myself, thank you to Animawarriors for contributing. That's amazing.
Thank you guys, really.
Super cool.
You guys are the reason why we're doing it. Me personally, you guys are the reason why I love doing it. And so
that's awesome.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's so cool. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know if, actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it, unless someone has any big burning questions about that announcement that I made, but I may not have all the answers because, like I said, we haven't worked out all the very finite details yet, but now you know what's happening. So you're going to want to probably be paying attention to social, because the social channels will eventually be where we would drop the next steps for something like this. Okay. So, Stephen, I'd like to just thank you again for being here tonight. You didn't have to be here, but here you are, sharing your wisdom, sharing your good vibes with everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And it was a pleasure meeting you. We never even got a chance to really chat really quickly a while back, but I really honestly feel like I could talk to you like all night, because I mean, I like where you're coming from. I'm drinking your Kool-Aid, my friend. I'm drinking your Kool-Aid.
Thank you. And thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And agreed. I feel like I could talk to you for hours on end. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, man. Have a really good evening, and I'll see you around. Cheers.
Thanks. See you guys.
Bye. So that was pretty cool. Hopefully we can get some new information out there really soon about the details on those reviews. I would love to be reviewed by Stephen. I just like where he's coming from. I think he's got the right attitude. And I think with enough people that think like him, maybe we can slowly change this industry to make it a little bit more healthy for everybody. And as Stephen said, like, it's not like, yes, healthy is great, but like, it also means better work. If people are happy and healthy, it means that we can push bigger boundaries and we can move bigger and more important mountains as an industry. And I mean, I think that's obviously good for everybody, right? It's good for us, the creators. It's great for the consumers of our creativity, and everybody would theoretically win in a case like this. And by the way, Tyler, I've been compiling in my brain during this conversation. You know what? I was a bit too defensive when you brought that out. I really appreciate you saying what you did, because if you think about it, I rewound it in my head. I kind of made a joke about it, and it kind of does go against the grain of what I've been saying. I mean, like I said, out of context, someone would have been like, hey, well, like, what the hell? But, I don't know if you were here for the whole chat, but I was digging in pretty deep with Stephen on my not so enthusiastic attitude towards, crunches in general, and how they are totally 100%, like usually a product of someone effing up. And unfortunately, some studios have just decided to say that it's, I guess that's just the way it is, and it doesn't have to be. And so anyways, just person to person, like, thank you. I didn't mean to come off. I sometimes do that. I'm just, it's a bad habit when someone says something and I quickly try to like say, I don't think that was the case, but having reflected on it, I think you're right. I should have been a bit more tactful when making a stupid side joke like that. Because it's these little things, right, that add up to turning into a toxic culture at a company. It really does. It's like it all takes is enough people that are being too macho, and they're not willing to say, well, actually, yeah, we're willing to do crunch, but at the same time, we also know where the limit is, and everyone needs to be in on that. Because if you're the one person that speaks out in a production against crunch, it can be kind of terrifying. You know what I mean? It could be like social suicide at the workplace, and that's not cool. And so yeah, anyways, I just wanted to, I'm glad you're still here so that I can have that quick, hey, by the way, I think you were right kind of a conversation. So thank you. If you do have questions about any of this stuff, Stephen has been gracious enough to just say, hey, reach out if you got questions for him, which is super freaking dope that he'd be willing to sort of take questions like that. But it doesn't surprise me. It seems to fit with his MO and his personality that he's a bit of an open book. So, take him up on that offer, and stay tuned on more details on the actual, the reviews themselves. We'll get that information to you as soon as humanly possible. Thank you for being here tonight, chat. It means a lot to Agora community that you took the time out of your night to hang out with us and sort of just talk about, the stuff that we like to talk about. Luckily, you are interested in the same things we are. So that's great. See you around, stay animated, stay healthy, and see you on the next stream. Cheers.
Dun.